Hello Internet! In this video we are going to be looking at Xamarin, which is a cross-platform mobile system. This is a framework built in C# that lets you take a .NET C# app and bring it to both Android and iOS. So Microsoft recently acquired it and made it free. Previously there was a licensing cost to it, and it's been around for a number of years, but this is the first year, well actually probably just over a year now that it's been open source. So we're going to play with it. It's been something I've wanted to do for a long time, but I've never had the chance. And that's probably not a good thing because I've never actually used it before. So I have it all installed. It should all work, but this may or may not go well because I don't really know what we're doing. So I've opened up our binary clock app here. And what we're going to start doing here is sort of start transitioning this into a cross-platform system that we can use everywhere. So this video is sort of getting started. There's not going to be any, we're not going to start moving our binary clock over yet. This is sort of just an exploration of what Xamarin can do. We're going to be opening up an Android project and seeing if we can run that in the simulator. Haven't tried that either. I assume it works. We'll see. I know some people don't like it, so if this isn't your thing, if you don't like the more exploratory stuff, then check out some of the other videos or come back for the next part when we actually start bridging over our binary clock. This is just me tinkering with Xamarin that I've never used before. So we're going to see what happens. I think I know what I need to do, which is going to be, we're going to create a new project, and it should be a Xamarin Android project, I think. Like I said, not totally familiar with this, but we're going to give it a go. I'm going to bring in a blank Android application. So we're going to call it our binary clock.android, I guess. Why not? And so this is just going to spin up a Android project template. It's gonna, looks like it pulled up our getting started with Xamarin stuff. Got a bunch of really cool videos we can watch, all of that cool stuff. Gonna ignore that because, so what I'm gonna do is I think I'm just going to get it started. So I do have an Android emulator. It looks like it's running Android 6. So Android is a little bit different than Windows Phone. Windows Phone has build numbers where the build number of Windows represents the feature set. And then you have Windows 8, Windows 8.1, and then Windows 10 as sort of your major tiers. Android's a little bit differently, or works a little bit different. There's two versions that matter. There's Android and then the version number, so Android 6 or Android 7 or whatever. And then there's also an API level. And so these increment a little bit faster, so there may be additional features added in between these major versions that you may want to take advantage of. So the API version is what's going to defines what features are available to us. So this phone is going to be running Android 6 with API level 23. And one of the important things here is the API level you define is going to limit what can access your app. So we could crank this up, but then less and less phones would be able to do it. And one of the key things with Android is there's a lot of phones that are a few versions back, especially when you consider Universal Windows Platform is a little bit ahead, mostly because it's on PC, which doesn't have this problem as much, and because it's newer. Android's been around for years, so it's got a lot of deprecated devices that aren't being updated anymore and are still back on those old versions that don't really work. Anyway, I'm going to start this. Hopefully, this is faster than the stock Android emulator, because historically the stock Android emulator has been awful, and it works, and there's some features that I actually prefer over the Windows Phone emulator. But the issue it's always had is at least when I used to develop for Android a few years back, it would take a good 10 minutes to start. So what is this saying? Running an x86 based AMD virtual whatever is 10 times faster. We strongly recommend creating a new AVD, which is going to be our virtual device. So the way the Android emulator works is you create virtual devices for the emulator. This is saying we should use an x86 version, but you create these virtual devices and they have the Android version and the API level, and that way you can build, like if you want to test on tablets, you just build a new AVD. We're going to ignore that for now and just let this start up. So like I was saying, this used to take a long time. I believe it's gotten better. I was told it got better, but I haven't really touched Android since I was working on it those few years ago. And that was all Java stuff. Never touched Xamarin before, or Apache Cordova, which is similar, like Xamarin's cousin. The difference is Xamarin is in C#. Apache Cordova is all web-based. It's all JavaScript and HTML. So they both can do sort of the same thing. At least that's my understanding. We'll probably actually look into Cordova at some point just to kind of compare the two. But right now, we're doing Xamarin. So we'll see what this does. I think I'll give it a little bit of time. So I'll cut until this boots up. One of the big tricks with Android is you never close the emulator, because as you can see, it takes a long time. So usually you start it once and then you keep it, or you buy a really cheap Android device. I actually have some of those lying around, but I don't know how well displaying it on this screen would be. And it'd be a little bit inconvenient on my desk right now. So we're going to use the emulator. So I'll be right back when this is done. All right. So it looks like it's just booting up. It just got here. It took about 5 more minutes. I don't know how long I talked while it was booting up, but it took about 5 minutes from when I cut to here. So it looks like it started everything. Part of the reason it's so slow is because this is emulating an ARM CPU on an Intel-based processor, which is just slow. So that's why it's recommending switching it over to x86, so you can run it natively instead of doing all this emulation stuff. So I imagine this is going to be... It's a little bit laggy, but that's fine. That's kind of expected. So you can see down here, it actually has started building our actual app, and it should eventually kick it over. So the reason, I didn't really talk about this before, but the reason you kind of use Xamarin is not so you can take an app and immediately just bring it over to a different platform. To my understanding, that it's not very good at that. What it is really good at is taking background logic. Like if you have a lot of really intense background logic going on, you can write all of that in C# once, test it once, and then write a different UI for Android and Windows Phone or Universal Windows Platform or iOS or whatever. Because each of the reason you do that is because each of these platforms is gonna have different features. It's going to have different UI styles and all of that. And so if you try to just merge it all, it doesn't really work. It just doesn't feel right. So what Xamarin does is it kind of exposes all of the parts of the normal OS. Like you can see we have like standard Android activities, which are like your main screens. They're the same thing as like our main page here. And so you're getting Android stuff, but it's all in C# code. So what that lets you do is interface with that backend, so you can have pretty much everything up to the view be shared between your apps. And because of that, it's really important that you kind of keep that model view controller, because you can keep your controllers, at least to my understanding, you can keep your controllers and kind of share them between apps and kind of have all the logic still there. But then all of the actual view logic, you have to rewrite for each platform, which depending on the app, For this one, it might actually be a lot more work because I don't know if there's anything that we can port across. But with something where you're doing a lot of background processing, or there's just a lot of computation or math or something like that, when you have to do that, this makes a lot more sense. So this may not be the best way to showcase it, but it's what we're going to use. This is still taking a very long time. So it looks like it's building it and sending it over to our emulator, which we just have to wait for. So for now, I guess we can. This is this is an Android phone. There's nothing. Oh, there shouldn't be anything missing. It can do all the Android things. You should actually be able to go and like download new apps and everything if you need it. Haven't really played around with that too much, but this will give you Android. And so anything that works on an Android phone, you don't actually need to do Xamarin either with this. This is just an Android emulator, so if we have a Java Android APK, we can actually just push that onto this device and start testing it. It is slower, so sometimes that doesn't necessarily work well, but it's an option. So I'm going to do another cut and wait for it to catch back up because it looks like it's still building. Once that finishes, it should deploy the package over to our emulator here, and then I would expect it to open up, and so we should just see a blank activity. I don't think there's anything in here. Yeah, so we would just get an empty application. So if we get that, we know it's working. If we get stuck here, then we can get concerned. Oh, I may have talked too long. It seems to be doing something. Ta-da! Cool. So this is our blank application. Isn't this interesting? So we have our label here, which I believe is coming straight from here and going right there. And then, yeah, there's our app. Isn't this interesting? The cool thing is all C# stuff. So we can actually start modifying this. So going into Android, if you know Android development, I might get some of this wrong because I did it about a year and, well, 2 years ago almost. And even then it was only for a short period of time. I'm not a big fan of Android, honestly. Most of it has to do with the way the applications get architected. I don't like the way it works. So the way it does work, now that I'm gonna start digging into that, is you have this resources folder, which is sort of your God mode. It's everything in your application. So you have this drawables folder, which is going to contain everything that can be drawn to your screen. So that'd be images, some components, I think, and a bunch of other stuff. Anything that gets drawn to the screen goes there. Then you have this layout, which I opened here. So this is Xamarin's editor. It's not going to be the classic like UWP editor. This is coming from Xamarin. And then we have strings, which this is our application name, which is actually coming in. We should be able to pull that out. Now let me jump over to the source here. No? Okay. So, like I said, my Android knowledge is a little bit sketchy, so we're gonna make this up as we go. Well, I'm gonna make it up, and you guys are gonna yell at me in the comments because I'm gonna get this wrong. So I don't actually know how to use this at all, which is probably not a good thing. But let's see, does this work? Cool. So I'm just going to mess around with this quick and just drop a bunch of things in here. So we have a toolbox. It's the same toolbox you'd get in the Universal Windows Platform or WPF or anything like that. But this is going to have all your Android controls. So we've got, I don't know what this is. All right, we can get rid of that. But I pulled in a spinner, a button, and some large text. And so if we go into this source now, we can see those three components. This should look, it's fairly similar to the Universal Windows Platform. There's nothing too outlandish. They're both going to be XML based, and they're both going to have sort of that hierarchical look. The difference is Android has a number of different layouts, and that's sort of, so there's not really a page here. It's kind of implied. And then these linear layouts are kind of, so this would be more or less the equivalent of like a stack panel. And then I believe there's like a grid layout. No, that must not be it. Wasn't closed. Never mind. It does exist. And so I don't know if that is valid. No, maybe. Sure. How do I do this? Sorry, I don't know how to move things in the grid. But anyway, there's different layouts which are more or less translate directly from UWP. So you get grids, you get stack panels. They're just called different things. So yeah, that's fun. Can't go back any further. That's interesting. So we're gonna pull back in our linear layout, which just is top to bottom, and go back to our designer. Get this. And then let's talk about strings for a bit. Android really likes this strings.xml. I'm not convinced, but the way this works is it's effectively a key value pair, but it's a little bit more than that. So in here you have a name, which is the name of the resource, and then you have the actual text. The advantage of this strings.xml is you can actually give it locales. So you can actually make this specific to, like, if you want to write this in Spanish, all you need is these same resources with the same key and then just different values. The problem with that is then you have very big giant files. Like this is short, usually it gets bigger, a lot bigger, and I don't like that. I don't know, maybe there's a way around it, but in my experience that's what happened. So all I'm going to do for now is just rename our application, and I think that should change our binary clock. It may not show up here because we haven't built it. I'm not entirely sure what kind of quirks we're going to get here, but I'm going to deploy it again, see what we get, and we'll see. This is mostly just a video to kind of figure this stuff out, because I'm kind of curious what's similar and what's different. For the most part, it seems almost identical to writing it in Java. It's just in C#, which I'm okay with that. I actually prefer C#. If you haven't guessed after the 100+ videos or whatever, I kind of prefer C# over Java. I work with Java at work, then I come home and do C#, and then I get them mixed up, and then I do C# and Java and C#, and it's great. But both of them are kind of nice. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. C#, in my opinion, though, because it came after Java, it learned from Java, and because of that, I think it has some nice advantages. So that doesn't work. What's happening is this string is coming from here, which I don't know how to get yet. This should all be the same. So I would assume if you know how to get it from Android, you would know how to get it from Xamarin, but I don't know how to get it, so I guess we're gonna make something up. This bundle. All right, that's that. Okay, so another thing about Android, there's two UI elements. Activities are your pages. Yeah, I guess that's sort of the best way to describe it. They're sort of the pages in your application. So they're specific places you go to do something. So you have an activity, you go there. Then on those activities, there's what's called fragments. These came afterwards. They didn't used to exist, but they're sort of controlled components. They're like our user controls would be in UWP. So those are going to be more isolated, and they kind of fix some of the quirks of activities. So what this bundle is when you create this, it actually has to recreate the activity. What I mean is your activity is created obviously when you navigate to this app. Not this app, obviously. Let me find it. There we go. So we open up our binary clock. If I rotate this, for example, you'll see it did that and then it flashed. That flash there is it actually recreating our entire activity. So it actually recalled this onCreate. And in previous versions of Android, what that would mean is all of the information on your page just got wiped out. So the idea here is you'd use activities to kind of store your pages, and then on those activities you would have fragments, and those maintain their state when that happens. And so there's a bunch of things that trigger that state change. Just rotating it is probably the most common. That's the bug that I've had to deal with the most in the past. Just weird things like if you have a thread in an activity, you rotate it and suddenly that thread leaks and you get all sorts of weird stuff. But that's not the only thing. There's pretty much anything that would change how this would perform is going to be part of this. So I rotated that the wrong way, but effectively anything that would change how your phone should operate. So if you change the locale, for example, so if you change it from like English to Spanish, that would cause this to happen because it's going to have to reload all those string references and do a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, it's kind of some of this you kind of see what they were envisioning. I'm just not sure. I'm not convinced, I guess. I'm not sure it got pulled off. Anyway, I'm rambling a lot in this just because welcome to Android, and I have a lot to say about Android. So I want to make it clear, I actually really like the platform. I think it's a good move, and there's a lot of things that I wish were in the Universal Windows platform. So some of the cool things, you can actually, like these layouts, for example, you can make new ones that specify specific sizes, for example. I don't remember off the top of my head how to do that, but you can name it like X large or something. I don't, again, that's not probably correct, but then you could put like a main AXML. It'd be slightly different in your actual Java application, but here, just doing this as an example, you can do something like this and get both of them here. And then what happens is if that extra large layout, or if the phone specifies an extra large layout size, what would happen is it would load that instead of your default or whatever, and you can specify those at every level. So this way you can actually kind of very easily make unique styles for tablets versus phones or whatever else you need. And I actually think that works better than the Universal Windows Platform, which kind of doesn't even bother with that. It does get gross, and I don't really... In larger apps, it's not very nice, but at the same time, it's nice just because of the way it is, where it allows you to be explicit about what you expect to happen, instead of kind of hoping the software is smart enough to figure it out. Anyway, we're going to... I think the idea here is let's get it so that when we enter text into a text box and hit a button, that it goes into this text down here. And then I think that'll be good. We'll actually have some sort of user input going on that we're able to see and react to. Our binary clock actually doesn't need that, but I think it's something that we should look into, because that it'll deal with a number of things that we can play with. Now I just need to find it. Okay, text fields. Android has a lot of these. There's like numbers, multi-lines. So this is a multi-line one. Don't want that, but it exists, and there's different ones for pretty much every input. You can have autocomplete versions, non-autocomplete versions. Interestingly, the new version of Android actually is coming out with some fun autocomplete features. So it will actually autocomplete, or it has an autocomplete API that you can expose throughout the phone. So apps can actually help with autocompletion. So I think that's interesting. Yeah, so we have a text box, we have a button, and we have text. Cool. Let's jump into resources changed. I'm going to close that. Let's do something. So part of the issue we're going to run into is I don't actually remember any of how to do this. So it's going to be interesting. They've got like a little about here that talks about, it actually covers a lot of the things that I kind of already went over, I think. Yeah. Oh, right. There's that R type. So Android has this R, which is sort of the all-inclusive master of everything. I don't know how to describe it. It's gross. It's pretty much, so we have these strings, for example. The way you access those, let's see if I can actually do this. You do R dot something. In order to get the build system to recognize Android resources, set the build action to Android resource. Okay, that's done. The native Android APIs do not operate directly with file names, but instead operate on resource IDs. When you compile an Android application that uses resources, the build system will package the resource for distribution and generate a class called R. That contains the tokens for each one of the resources included. For example, for the above resources layout, this is what the R class would expose. So effectively with the default, which is what they're showing, you get something like this. And so what this is actually doing is it's saying, here are sort of, it's kind of like pointers, I guess, is the best way to do it. It's kind of memory pointers to references. So you have this icon, and then you have a reference to what that icon is. So it's just kind of a single icon is created in memory, and then you have a bunch of references that all point to it. And that happens for strings, it happens for layouts, it happens for pretty much anything bigger, and they all go in this really gross R. I don't like R. It just, I don't know. Eventually, when you get big apps, I don't think it works well. But I don't. So it should be created, right? Unless it's called resource. Dot string. Okay, it's not called R. That's apparently wrong. It is called hello or application name, or not called either of those. It's called resource. Sorry. And so in this resource class, there's going to be your strings, your layouts, which are going to be like main. You've got your drawables, which are going to be your icons, and a few things that we aren't using yet. So we are going to ignore them. So don't exactly know how to get everything hooked up. So I'm going to go look this up because otherwise I will sit here and stare at this. Well, actually, let's see if it'll help us out. So it's already open, so let's just do that. Cool. We can select our button. And then I want to... Is there like a button pressed? Maybe, but I'm not seeing it. So in Android Studio, which is sort of the Java equivalent, it will list some of these events, and you can actually tie into them. Yeah, on click. Oh, okay. What is this? So there's a bunch of behaviors here, but I don't think it can automatically create one for us. So let's just try this. On click. One other thing I'd point out that I'm noticing, this layout, it's called an AXML. This is going to be the same whether you're working in Java or C#. So I believe, don't quote me on this, but you should be able to port this between Android Studio and Java to Visual Studio and Xamarin and back if you need to. And I don't think you'd run into too many issues. Everything else would have to change. All of your C# code would obviously be obsolete. But this looks the exact same. So I don't anticipate there being too many issues. I don't know what this is trying to do. What happens if I do that? That should break, right? On click, give it a string. So this is our old app. Just want to make that somewhat clear, I think. I hope. Huh. Yeah, okay, so it's uninstalling it and reinstalling it. Sorry, I'm getting confused. So, hopefully it goes. One of the things I'm noticing is it's not as responsive. That's probably because we're using an emulator. Usually when I was doing UWP, we were just running it natively on my computer. So between this and the next episode, I'll probably spin up that x86 version of Android, just so that we don't have this emulation going on. That should speed it up, and then we can actually get a proper comparison. But this would get tedious after like 8 hours of this. I would not be in a good mood. So yeah, if you're stuck with this, go buy like a cheap Android tablet or something, because they're honestly not that expensive, and your time is more valuable than this. Granted, I don't know. People say I waste people's time, so why is everything gone? Because I think at this point, it's actually started. But it's not there. Okay. I broke something. So I'm going to fix this by just removing that. Gonna restart it, and then I'm gonna go and just after we verify this works, I'm gonna go and actually research how to hook up those behaviors. In Java, it was pretty much just an anonymous class. So I'm going to assume, probably wrongly, that it's like a lambda or something that we have to implement. Don't know how that works. Don't really know how any of this works. But I'm going to go look that up, and then it should, hopefully, all sort of start coming together. And then we can just kind of pull the text assignment in. That should be relatively straightforward. I'm saying that a lot, and then I'm going and screwing it up and then going and looking it up. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to assume this works and just kind of cut it. Well, maybe not. Did I break something else? I'm getting concerned. Huh. Okay then. I'm going to also look up how to do this, because our controls are gone. And that's kind of weird. So yeah, I'll be back. There's no sense in me wasting your guys' time with this kind of debugging, because it's mostly just research, because I haven't done any of that yet. So I don't know, we got 30 minutes into this before I had to go and actually Google foo. But yeah, see you guys in a bit. Alright, so I think I have what we need. So what we're going to do is we are going to grab our button. So there's two ways to do this from what I was reading. There's this way, which is sort of the code behind way. So this is like the basic way. It's sort. I'd say it's probably the worst solution. Well, it is the worst solution because this is going to turn into a mess if you keep building on this. But it's simpler. And then there's the behavior thing, which is a Xamarin thing that lets you implement like separate behavior classes that define specific things. So what we were looking at before, if I go back there are these like Android on click. This is a behavior that we can sort of attach to. So theoretically that should work. It's saying we can actually just define. I'm going to try this. It says that we can just implement this say hello, and it will call it. So if I give it this function, and then let's just do something super basic. Let's create a variable, and then we'll increment it twice. If I drop a breakpoint here, we should be able to actually test if this gets called or not. Not really sure. It occurs to me that I didn't actually fix the issue that was causing the UI to not render. I didn't even look into it. So this may not work. We'll know pretty quick. But yeah, so theoretically this should work. What I was going to do was there is also a way to grab a resource, which is going to be, I've got a thing pulled up there. I can actually uncomment this because the app already built, and unlike what happens with UWP where you can't edit things, this doesn't really care. Well, it cares now, but it didn't. And so there's a find resource by ID that we can use, and then we can give it that resources ID from the resources that we have. So each of those controls actually has an ID assigned to it. Okay, I'm gonna need to fix the UI not appearing, because that's sort of a killer feature. Without it, we're kind of stuck. But I'll do this as well. So there is a find view by ID. We're gonna find a button. I can just store that in a variable. And then what you would do is just provide the ID of your button, for example. And so where this is coming from is in your main, you have this weird string here, which is specifying there's an ID called button1. Normally you would name this something less bad, but this is just auto-created, so that's what we got. But anyway, yeah, there's all of that. That actually may have also fixed it because we had that random behavior there. So instead, I'm going to put that on the button. On click, say hello. Still questioning that this is going to work. I'm skeptical. But I'll run it again, and then we'll pick up, and we will have our UI working, and that button may or may not be getting the event. So when I get that all, we'll pick back up. So see you then. Oh, don't tell me that was the issue. Oh, don't tell me that was the issue. That would be silly. That's right. It's right there. Don't. Oh no. That's got to be it. I totally screwed everything up. Oh, okay, there it is. Got it. Dang it. No. Okay. So I found the issue. I don't like it. So there were 2 lines of code that were commented. One of them said, set our view from the main layout resource. The other one, set the view to the main layout resource. All we had to do was just uncomment that. We were just getting a blank activity. So our activity existed, but there was no layout, so it wasn't actually drawing anything. I should have. That was obvious. So, yeah. That was it. It's fixed. That's stupid. I hate when I do something like that because you feel so silly after you realize it. So what we're going to do, I'm going to plug the button back in. We've got our large text already there. All we want now is to actually hook this up. So we have our on click. We're going to do say hello. And we're just going to try and see if this actually connects. It might. We'll see. Not sure. Not even close. But it's worth a try. And if that does work, that's well, I think behaviors are still the way to go. But that's probably better than doing this and then assigning a callback that way. So if this works, that would be nice. If not, we can do it the other way. Because once we have that reference to the button there, we can actually just assign this manually and just do it that way. But it'd be nicer if we didn't have to do that, because that's gross. So we have all of this. Hopefully this works. If it does, all we have to do is actually change this, say hello, so that we can actually say hello. So I should be getting a button shortly. It actually has to load our layout, but I can click application in break mode. I don't know if you guys can hear that either, but there's like a weird clicking coming from the emulator when I do that kind of stuff. We're getting an unhandled exception. Oops. Binary clock has stopped working. Okay, yeah, more clicking. I don't know what that's about. We're gonna pretend like that didn't work because I'm pretty sure that didn't work. So we're gonna take our button. Ooh, that's not right. Do our button dot on click. Has click listeners. We just need to assign a click listener, which that sounds kind of gross, but I'm checking out what they were doing. They have a touch. So maybe there's an event called touch. There is. So I assume this is the one for click. There is. Cool. So we can add a click event that's just going to call say hello. That's not how you do that. Take our object and our event and call that. Cool. So now all this is doing is assigning a lambda function. So when our button is clicked, we want to say hello. This is our sender and our event arguments. Those are just standard things. Doesn't look like anything special comes with it. It's just the generic event arguments. So that's all there. But it should now call our say hello. And we saw previously, at least breakpoints work. Not the one we wanted, but breakpoints will work in Visual Studio. So you can set them and they'll be hit. The debugger is attached and all that works. Cool. Now, this should work. And then all we have to do is pull information from a text box, which we don't have anymore. I deleted it while I was testing. And then just set it to another text, which that should actually be really straightforward. Because all we have to do is just find the two resources and then just assign the text to one of them from the other. So I don't imagine that'll be too hard. We're just kind of taking baby steps to kind of make sure everything's kind of working as we go through this, just so we don't have to do that. And I'm going to set another breakpoint here, just so we can kind of emphasize that these activities get recreated. So here is it creating our view, going through and doing that. We'll continue from there. Everything pops up. I can hit the button. We get into say hello. So our click event got called. And then just to test our rotation, we can do this and recreate our activity, and this whole thing gets destroyed and recreated. So that's sort of application lifecycle 101 for Android. Just don't depend on your activities being around, because they may not be. In Android, a lot of people have gotten around this, including myself, by just removing rotation. Because sometimes you, especially with legacy apps, you developed it in a way that didn't support fragments, which handle that issue. So if you don't support it, the quickest fix is just disable rotation so that doesn't happen. It doesn't fix all the issues, but it fixes most of them. But we're better than that. We don't need to do that. So yeah, there's that. I'm going to pull in a area text. You can actually create it this way. Area text area. I shouldn't be doing this because I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, okay. You can just type there. I'm not going to though, because I am not familiar enough with the names of controls to know what I'm doing and to know if I'm doing the right thing. So we're just going to pull in a plain text box like that, and we'll get it in there. I'm gonna rename everything. I'm not actually gonna rename everything. It's fine for demo purposes. This works. So we have our edit text 1 and our text view 1. So this will be our player name, and this will be our player greeting. So what we're going to do is we're going to look up player name, we're going to see what's in there, and then we're just going to say hello, whatever's in there. So we need a player name, which we can find view by ID. What was it called? An edit text. Yeah, that makes sense. Then we just need our resource, which is going to be the id.player name. And we also need the player greeting. And so this should get us both of our actual resources. This is actually a text view, not an edit text. So with both of these, all we need to do then is say player greeting dot that's not right, text is equal to hello plus our player name dot text, and that should be enough to actually do everything we wanted. It should pull out all of that. Ideally, if we were actually doing this for real, we would have a resource for hello. So it would come in natural language, and you could actually like change the entire format without having to worry too much about it. We're not doing that because this is just a test, but hopefully this whole thing will come together and it'll kind of work. It's not really a binary clock. It's not even close. But it's a first step. It's kind of welcome to Xamarin. So yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem too hard to pick up. I'm actually fairly surprised. I've been really wanting to play with Xamarin for years now, and previously it was just expensive, and I was busy with other things. Now it's more just been I've had other things going on, and honestly, I was under the impression that it wouldn't be very performant and it would just be hard. This doesn't feel like either of those. I mean, obviously we're running on an emulator, so performance, judging that, no idea. But everything else, everything seems to be fine. It seems to work. Can I type in the editor? Nope. Okay, there's that. That took forever. So if I just give myself a name of test, for example, when I hit this, yeah, there we go. It says hello test. So everything's working. We're actually able to take information from here, respond to button clicks, and then display output in our text there. And so with this is actually enough to more or less write our entire binary clock. We'll have to play with drawables a bit, and we can actually do we could do some really interesting stuff with that. But we'll get to those in the future. But for now, I'm going to leave this here because I think this is a good start to Xamarin, and for the people that don't really like this kind of episode, because there's a lot of people that they just want the content, they just want here's how you do this. They don't like the exploration, sort of the let's play exploratory stuff. So in respect for those people, let's cut it here and then pick up in the next videos with some actual binary clock stuff. Interestingly, this is probably the last video for this week. I'm traveling again tomorrow, so I don't think I'm going to get a video recorded, and it's gotten quite late, so I'm not sure I can do another one tonight. So I'll be back on the weekend, and hopefully I can get something done then. And hopefully something will pop up. March hasn't gone well. I try to do these every weekday, and for the most part it's gone great. But March has been very busy for me, and I think I've missed more than half of the scheduled videos I wanted to do. So I'm going to be better about that. I don't know when that's going to start, hopefully soon, because March is almost over and it hasn't gotten better. But that's sort of the plan. So apologies in advance for there not being any more videos. Things have slowed down and I've gotten more projects, so not really the best, but we'll see where that goes. But anyway, going back to this, if there's anything you guys want to see, if there's anything, if there's any ideas you have for how we could use this, I'd love to hear them. It does support iOS as well. I'm not sure we can do that. I don't have an iOS, or I don't have a MacBook or anything like that to develop iOS apps on. So I'm not sure we can actually test them or create them. But if that's something you guys want to see, I'd love to know about it so I can consider that in the future. If there's other ideas you have for things to look at for like cross-app compatibility, Cordova is one of them. Xamarin is obviously one of them. But if there's things you guys want me to explore in this area, let me know, because I haven't done as much research into this whole work everywhere kind of platform as I probably should have. So if there's something that you guys have found and you're like, let's check this out, let me know. I'm super interested in this. So yeah. But for now, this is where we're at. I've said that so many times now. So yeah. If there's anything else you guys want, let me know in the comments. But until next time, see you, Internet.